Mrs. Weasley glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner. Harry liked this clock. It was completely otherless if you wanted to know that time, but otherwise very informative. It had 9 golden hands, and each of them was engraved with one of the Weasley family's names. There were no numerals around the face, but descriptions of where each family member might be. Home, school, and work were there, but there was also lost hospital, prison, and in the positions there the number 12 would be on a normal clock motor pedal. 8 of the hands were currently pointing at the home positions, but Mrs. Weasley, which was the longest, was still pointing at work. Mrs. Weasley thought, "Your father hasn't had to go into the office at weekends since the day of your know-who," she said. "They're working him far too hard. This dinner's going to be ruined if he doesn't come home soon."
Well, father feels he's got to make up for his mistake at the match, doesn't he? Said Perry. If truth be told, he was that unwise to make a public statement without clearing it with his head of department fist. Don't you dare blame your father for what that wretched skitter woman wrote, said Mrs. Weasley, flaring up at once. If Dad hadn't said anything, old Rita would just have said it was disgraceful that nobody from the ministry had commented, said Bill, who was playing chess with Ron. Rita Skeeter never makes anyone look good. Remember, she interviewed all the Gringotts curse breakers once and called me a long-haired pillock. Well, it is a bit long there, said Mrs. Weasley gently, if you'd just let me.
No, Mom. Rain lashed against the living room window. Hermione was immersed in the Standard Book of Spells Grade 4. Copies of which Mrs. Weasley had bought for her. Harry and Ron in Diagon Alley. Charlie was darling a firepool baklava. Harry was polishing his firebolt, the broomstick servicing Kid Hermione, but given him for his 13th birthday open at his feet. Fred and George were sitting in a far corner, quills out, talking in whispers, their heads bent over a piece of parchment. "What are you two up to?" said Mrs. Weasley sharply, her eyes on the twins. "Homework," said Fred vaguely. "Don't be ridiculous, you're still on holiday," said Mrs. Weasley. "Yes, we've left a bit late," said George. You're not by a chance writing out a new order for are you?" said Mrs. Weasley sweetly. You wouldn't be thinking of restoring Weasley wizard vases by any chance.
"Now, Mom," said Fred, looking up at her, a pained look on his face. "If the Hogwarts Express crashed tomorrow and George and I died, how would you feel knowing that the last thing we ever heard from you was an unfounded accusation?" Everyone laughed, even Mr. Weasley. "Oh, your father's coming," she said suddenly, looking up at the clock again. Mr. Weasley's hand had suddenly spun from work to travelling. A second later it was shuddered to a huff on home with the others, and they heard him calling from the kitchen. "Come in, Arthur," called Mr. Weasley, hurrying out of the room. A few moments later, Mr. Weasley had come into warm living room, carrying his dinner on a tray. He looked completely exhausted. "Well, the fat's really in the fire now," he told Mr. Weasley, and he sat down in an armchair near a fire and toyed unenthusiastically with his somewhat shriveled cauliflower. Rita Skeeter's been ferreting around all week, looking for more ministry mess-ups to report. And now she's found out about poor old Bertha going missing, so that'll be the headline in the Prophet tomorrow. I told Bagman he should have sent someone to look for her ages ago. Mr. Crouch has been saying it for weeks and weeks, said Percy swiftly. Crouch is very lucky Rita hasn't found out about Winky, said Mr. Weasley irritably. He'd be a week's worth of headlines in his house elf being caught holding the wand and conjured the dog mark.
I thought we were all agreed that that elf, while irresponsible, did not conjure the mark, said Percy hotly. If you ask me, Mr. Coach is very lucky no one at the Daily Prophet knows how mean he is to elves, said Hermione angrily. Not look here, Hermione, said Percy, a high-ranking ministry official like Mr. Couch. The service answering obedience from him servant. His slave, you mean, said Hermione, her voice rising surely, because he didn't pay Winky, did he? I think you'd all better go upstairs and check that you're packing properly, said Mrs. Wellesley, breaking up their argument. Come on now, all of you. Harry repeated his broomstick, serving Kit, but his fifflebolt over his shoulder and went back upstairs in room. The rain shouldered even louder at the top of the house, accompanied by loud whistling and moan from the wind, not to mention sporadic howls from the goat who lived in the attic. Pigwidgeon began twittering and zooming around his gum again when he entered. The thing of the house pocket sound trunks seemed to have sent him into a frenzy of excitement.
Bunk himself all treats, said Ron, throwing a packet across to Harry. It might shut up hymns. Harry poked a few old treats through the bars of Pigwidgeon's cage, then turned to his monk Hedwig's cage, stood next to it, still empty. It's been over a week, Harry said, looking at Hedwig's deserted perch. Ron, you don't reckon Sirius has been caught to you? No, I would been in the Daily Prophet, said Ron. The ministry would want to show they caught someone, would they? Yeah, I suppose. Look here, stuff, Mum, go for you, stubbornly, diagonally. and she's got someone gold out of you vault for you, and she's washed out your socks.